Today on the podcast, we want to talk about a bunch of different job reports that have come out, how this relates to AI, everything that's going on in the industry. And this is from three main sources. So we have this triple whammy coming out of PWC, IMF, and also Deloitte. Connor, what are you seeing in these job reports?
This is something that everybody's talking about. So, Jaden, that I go out and I talk to a ton of companies. I do a ton of trainings on this. Like, this is, I don't want to say it's question number one, but it's pretty close. Like, what does this do to jobs, right? I worked with the Treasury Department on things this a little bit. Like, people want to know what is going to impact with their jobs. We talked about a little while ago saying that AI, it's not like AI is coming for your job because a job is not a monolithic thing, right? And Sam Altman had this great quote where he's like, it's not that it takes jobs, it takes tasks. And even taking is sort of a strong word. But we're seeing a ton of job cuts, and those job cuts tend to be almost exclusively, if as long as the company isn't failing, coming through, like AI is replacing this, AGI, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So people are just asking all the time, like, what does this actually mean? And now we have three great studies, as you said, from Deloitte, PWC, and IMF. Just real quick, let me just sort of say, like the Deloitte one, they surveyed almost 3,000 business and tech leaders who are currently piloting or implementing generative AI. And 70% said that they anticipate making significant adjustments in their hiring strategy within the next 2 years as a direct result of AI. I think that's a fair 70%. May actually even be low. By the way, when we say like 2 years, it drives me crazy when people say like 2 years. I'm like, 2 years? My gosh, it feels like so long. But anyway, there's that. The PWC one, which was a great one, their survey of CEOs, that they said they talked to 4,700 CEOs, 25% of CEOs globally expect to reduce their workforce by at least 5% this year due to generative AI. 5% across the board. That is huge. And I'm just, again, we're sort of going to see how much bigger that gets. 70% of CEOs anticipate AI changing their business models and requiring new skills within 3 years. Again, it'll be much tighter than that. And then just the other thing that just came out recently was IMF. And the IMF, International Monetary Fund, said 60% of workers in advanced economies will have jobs impacted. So, Jaden, as big as these numbers are, look, to me, they're underestimating, if anything. But I also just want to say, as we get into this conversation, I want your take on all this, that people, and I've talked about this on LinkedIn, people talk about, AI is going to take your job. Guys, it's not really like that. Anyway, we can get into sort of like more about what you can do about that. But I just feel super passionately about that. As you know, Jaden, I get really worked up about this, but I throw those numbers at you. Just right off the top, your thoughts, but also, like, does it feel conservative to you as well?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I think in a way, it does feel conservative. When I hear the numbers, I'm like, oh, that's conservative. It's going to have a bigger impact. But I will admit, I am in a bit of a tech bubble where
Yes.
like everything I see can be impacted. There's also, I go to like, I'd go to a restaurant and there's people cooking in the back. There's someone fixing the AC units on the front. There's someone paving the asphalt outside. Like these jobs are not impacted by AI in the same way. So I think there's like massive chunks of the economy that aren't. And so I think we'll play that in. But I mean, as soon as the humanoid robots come into play, though, I think every job is fair game. That's another story. And we've seen Elon Musk's Tesla AI robot went viral this week on
Clothes.
On X folding clothes. So I think that, and there's a bunch of other companies of announcements. So I think we're going to get into that discussion soon. That's going to be something that as a society, we're going to start talking about very soon. So when everyone's like, oh my gosh, AI is making this huge impact, get ready for humanoid robots. Like I think people underestimate a humanoid robot AI combo is going to be insane. You train it to do what humans do, and there's a majority of things that can get replaced. That's a whole nother conversation. Right now, where we're at with the AI that's coming down, when we're talking about the software, the technology, I think it's pretty accurate, the numbers that they're coming out with. And I know that people have different opinions. Some people think this is terrible. Like I get into conversations with people on LinkedIn all the time where they're like, I share some new advancement or thing, and they're like, this is terrible, and this AI model's bad because of X, Y, and Z, and all these reasons. And like, I get the sentiment, I get the fear. No one likes change. But like at the end of the day, this is inevitable. It's possible. It's more financially viable. So companies will do it. There is no stopping what is happening with AI and what it can do. And I think it's not very productive to have a conversation to be like, is it good? Is it bad? Because it doesn't really matter. It's happening. So what do we do about it? I think is kind of where I've come on a lot of this. And yeah, I think it will make some really big impacts. But at the same time, it's like, when dishwashers were invented, or when the assembly line was invented, or when all of these major transformations in the Industrial Revolution and these machines were invented, people probably had very similar feelings, opinions, fears, and apprehensions about it. But like overall, these advancements have increased the quality of life of the world. And I think AI will pull a lot of people out of poverty. I think it's going to, and poverty as we call it today, right? Because, I mean, if we look at like the way I'm living today in my modern house with electricity and plumbing is better than a king, 300 years ago would have been living in a castle. So I think overall, AI and everything that it will be able to automate and do will raise the global standard of living. Now, will people's jobs be displaced or they have to change and like a lot of shifts and change happen? 100%. But overall, I think it's net positive.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and I like where you take the conversation. That's where I was taking this as well. I think on LinkedIn, but this is happening. So the question about like is it conservative? Is it not? It almost doesn't matter because it's sort of like talking about the Super Bowl before it happens. It's like it's entertaining, but ultimately that game is going to be played and something's going to happen. So something's going to happen. The bigger question on the AI Applied podcast and what I think we should all be thinking about is how do you, and I'm going to use a loaded term here for a second, like how do you AI proof your job, right? And again, let me just say this. We have a really sophisticated audience out there. Like we know that we don't AI proof our job because what that sounds like, if you think about like waterproof, is like you stop the AI from coming in. That is not what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm talking about. I get a ton of opportunities to go and talk to C-suite level people, big companies, conferences, things like that. I do a ton of talking and training on all this. And here's what I find over and over again, because my training is based on how do you implement generative AI into your company, has a new way of thinking about it, all that kind of stuff. Here's what I hear over and over and over again. Yes, maybe generative AI is going to sort of like start changing these roles, and maybe it will minimize, the amount of work that's, or sort of like shorten the amount of work and impact jobs, all that kind of stuff. But what CEOs and C-suite level people, Jaden, tell me all the time is like, where are the people in our company who are going to be leading this effort? And I'm telling you right now that when we talk about like AI proofing your job, I don't mean keeping the AI in. I mean sort of like the opposite, right? I mean like get to be an expert on this. And here's the thing, guys. You do not need a technical background. I would almost argue that it's almost a detriment to have a technical background unless you're doing like the back end tech stuff. But what CEOs and what team leaders and everything want are have our people, who are the people on our team who are going to tell us how to speed up this process, who are going to tell us how to improve the quality of this. If you can do that, and guys, it is really, it's both very simple but complicated. You have to get trained. You have to learn this stuff. And Jaden and I talk about this kind of stuff all the time. How do you train yourself? How do you get training? But the most important thing is that if you can learn this, you are not going to get fired from your job. I don't want to guarantee it, but I'm telling you, you will be the person that people are looking for. Jaden, does that resonate with you as well?
100%. Yeah. And I think what you said is kind of important. Like nothing you do guarantees you won't get fired from your job because your position could be eliminated, whatever. But like if you're making sure you're staying up to date on everything happening in AI, you're going to know where to pivot. You're going to know how to change. You have background and experience that's very useful in all sorts of places. And while a lot of the roles and job functions like are going to be dramatically altered or changed, we still at the end of the day want people managing these workflows, watching these automations, optimizing them, working on them, and people that have experience doing all the traditional things. So I don't think it's like when you hear like job displacement, like maybe a company needs less employees or they can do more with what they have, and that's up to the company, I think, to determine what they do, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have 100 employees and you make them all 10 times more productive with AI, theoretically your company could produce 10 times as much. But that's not going to be the case. A lot of companies are going to be like, oh my gosh, we're 10 times more productive, cut down 90% of the staff. So like different companies will do different things, but that doesn't mean the need for all the people will be gone. So anyways, I also tend to think that it's like exciting from my perspective as being like a kind of like a business owner and working on projects. It's very exciting for me because I'm actually seeing in the job market right now a lot of people that are more willing to come and work in like these small startups and work on new projects and new ideas. Whereas previously it was very hard to compete like for tech talent. When I was building Self-Pause, really hard to compete with tech talent because there was unlimited money. It was the ZERP era and all these big companies were paying crazy salaries to their people. Now that they're starting to do layoffs and people are like, okay, got laid off from Google. Now all of a sudden I can find an incredible Google engineer that can come work on this really exciting, important project that's on a much smaller company. So I think in a way, like this is healthy for the economy. This is good. There's of course going to always be projects and businesses and things popping up and being built. So I think there's always going to be a place for these people to find. We're just going to create more businesses and more exciting things, in my opinion.
It's it's such a good point because we've seen that with OpenAI. We've talked about the talent war, everything like that. Like ultimately, like in this day and age, like a lot of like the really bright people in this field and the tech people who really understand how to build this stuff want to go somewhere where the company believes like, hey, yeah, give the free reign, all that kind of stuff. And it's just unclear as to sort of like how possible that is in big companies. So I love that. I love that with, especially, sort of some of the stuff that you're building, and you're much more of an entrepreneur than I am on that front. But right, like you can attract people saying like, look, we're going to sort of like follow your vision. You get to like really build this alongside each, sort of like people that you like, and you get to sort of do something that you've always wanted to do, but weren't able to do in big companies. I think that's huge. And also just listen, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're worried about your job and everything like that, you're doing the right thing. I'm telling you, like, this is what I love to sort of tell people. Go in and tell your boss, like, look, we are going to be a generative AI focused company. We're going to gain this much productivity, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to show you how to do it. And then go out and make that true. It's not like, learning French or learning calculus or something like that. There are resources out there. Jaden puts them out. I put them out. Like I'm going to try to be doing a lot more on this in terms of like training people on how to do this. I'll put out a product on it and all that kind of stuff. But really, I believe so firmly that there is a system. And again, not like I put out like kind of like an AI champion series on YouTube a couple of months ago or something like that. Like, hey, listen, here's 3 steps of things you can actually do. Guys, there's no learning curve here. You just have to be able to talk like a human. And trust me, I talk to so many companies. They are looking for you. So make yourself a strategy. You can do this. But this is the most important thing. When you hear about job loss, forget about like, well, how can I keep AI out? Bring AI in. You will be the person leading this at your company. I'm telling you.
100%. So I'm super excited for a lot of the advancements, a lot of the changes. If you're listening to this, you probably are in the same boat. You're seeing just how valuable this is. And so I think Connor has a great point of really making sure you're focusing on all the different ways that you can implement AI and optimize with it to gain that competitive advantage. Because honestly, I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like I'm not using AI for everything I'm doing. Am I late to the party? Like, no, you are so early and everything is rapidly advancing and improving. So if you can be on top of it right now, you'll be miles ahead of a lot of companies that still are not putting a big focus here. And you're going to just essentially guarantee that your career and your companies are very successful. So exciting stuff. Thank you so much for tuning in to the AI Applied podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, if you learned something, it would mean the world to us if you could leave us a review. If you're on Spotify or if you're on Apple, a review, you just got to scroll down, switch to the About Us page on Spotify, but it means the world to us. And we really appreciate it. So we hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.